Hello and welcome back to Insurance in Canada. Thank you for joining me. On today's episode, we're going to look at three stories. The first one looks at the flooding situation in Quebec after last week's back-to-back thunderstorms. The next story we're going to look at comes from Northern Saskatchewan, the plight of one family after they canceled their home insurance. And our third story for today looks at the cities in Ontario that saw the highest auto insurance premium hikes. So without further ado, let's take a look at insurance in the news. So our first story today comes from Northern Saskatchewan and the plight of a family who unfortunately chose to not renew their home insurance and the consequences of doing that. So from CTV News, we're going to have to rebuild our life. Family's home burns after canceling home insurance. Tessa Santana faced an unthinkable dilemma last year. Does she pay for house insurance or feed her family? We weren't in a good place, Santana told CTV News. It's not that I've never had house insurance. Last year was tough financially on us. Santana, a mother and grandmother, opted to cancel her insurance, never imagining the following year her Northern Saskatchewan community would be threatened by wildfires. And in case you're not familiar, this is L'Orange. Here on Google Maps, there's Prince Albert, Saskatchewan down here. Saskatoon and Regina are further south. So yeah, L'Orange is pretty far north in Saskatchewan on Lake L'Orange. Their home of 20 years, where they watched their kids and grandkids grow, burned down just north of L'Orange in early June. The fire killed most of their animals, including their two dogs and a donkey. That's something I've got to live with, she said. We're going to have to rebuild our life. Today, Santana and her husband, Leonardo, find themselves 3 hours south in Rosthern, Saskatchewan, at the Valley Regional Campground. They've been living in their trailer with their 11-year-old dog, Coco, for the last 6 weeks. We love camping. It's a camping trip, she said. However, when reality does hit you and you're like, this is our home, Santana still gets emotional at times, but she says they are fortunate to have the things they do. There's a TV and reclining chairs in a trailer. They've converted the shower into a closet for storage, and at night they sleep in a king-size bed. We're not really camping, we are glamping. We are making it as homey as we can, but it's hard to settle in, she said. At their current site, they have extension cords running from the trailer to an outlet at the site for over for power access. They've had to move campsites several times due to other park booking. It's tiring, it really is, but we're thankful that we've got to move within Rosthern Regional Park, and we didn't have to go and find something else, she said. The Santanas don't know where they'll end up. The campground will be their home for the summer, but they do at least, but they hope to at least be renting a place by the time the snow flies. I can imagine so, because I don't think you want to be staying inside a trailer in winter in Northern Saskatchewan. Leonardo, who had retired from the mining industry, will return to work Monday. That's gotta burn. That's gotta burn hard. Sorry, that's not a good pun, but to retire, to think you're done with working, especially in the mining industry, and because of choices they had to make to survive, now he's got to return back to the mining industry. The couple is saving up to buy or build a new home one day. When they do get a house, insurance will be a top priority, Santana said, and she hopes they won't ever be put in this position again. But if ever came down to it again, feeding my family or buying insurance every time I'm going to feed my family, Santana says. Yeah, that, it makes sense. There are priorities that we all have to face up to when it comes to limited resource. In the world that we live in, everything is expensive as ever been, and unfortunately for many people, it's come down to making those decisions between trying to protect and trying to feed. We saw, not last week, but the week before, or the episode before, that survey about homeowners down in the States having to look at the same situation. Not quite, because they were talking about failing home inspections and whatnot, not having the money to maintain their house. so preventing them from placing claims. But there are many people, and I've met many people who've had to make that decision between insurance and basically surviving, having to pay other expenses that take a bigger priority: food, rent, utilities. Those are essential to surviving. And unfortunately for this family, they gambled, and unfortunately the gamble did not pay off. Many people, it does, they can survive for a while and they win the gamble. I recall a story coming out of Florida, a couple who had forgoed insurance for 13 years and nothing ever happened. But unfortunately, the hurricanes from last September, the back-to-back hurricanes along the Gulf Coast, unfortunately did damage their house. And insurance in Florida is very expensive, as it would be for a rural area in Saskatchewan. So yeah, I understand when it comes to making those decisions as the priorities. The Santanas are not alone. Several insurance brokers told CTV News they've received calls from uninsured or underinsured clients who've lost property this wildfire season. Underinsured clients, if you're not familiar with that term, so somebody who's not insuring their property to its full replacement value. That would be on the property side, somebody who's underinsured. The main determining factor when it comes to your premium for property insurance is the coverage on the building itself, whether it be the dwelling for a residential dwelling or commercial building. A rule of thumb known as the insurance gap suggests that for every $1 in insured losses, there are $3 to $4 in uninsured losses borne by homeowners, businesses, and governments. It's a lot easier for a government to bear an uninsured loss than it is for homeowners and businesses. Last year was the costliest year on record for severe weather-related losses in Canada, reaching $8.5 billion in $8.5 billion in insured losses, following the insurance gap rule that puts the uninsured losses between $25.5 billion and $34 billion. For government, that's money coming out of budgets for hospitals, schools, and infrastructure development. For businesses, that's money coming out of budgets for business expansion, equipment upgrades, and employee compensation, assuming they can even survive that kind of loss. For most businesses, that means you're out of business because you don't have the funds available to try and replace that property, said Catherine Bacos, Managing Director of Finance and Resilience at the Intact Center of Climate Adaptation. Bacos said losses can be less if adaptations are made prior to an extreme weather event, including moving combustible materials away from the house and using fire-resistant siding and roofing. That is very true. Unfortunately, for most people, having the funds available to replace all the siding on your house or upgrading the roofing to, say, a metal roof that'd be more fire-resistant than asphalt shingles or cedar shakes, people unfortunately just doesn't have the money to do those kind of upgrades. So it's unfortunate, but unfortunately a lot of people are in that situation. And then at this point, do we really think that's going to improve much over the next few years? We can only hope. Our next story comes from Quebec. So last week they had back-to-back thunderstorms and the consequences of that. Quebec grapples with back-to-back thunderstorms, floods this week. Thursday flood comes days after storm-drenched southern parts of the province. Quebec was hit hard by rounds of severe thunderstorms throughout Thursday. In just a few hours, more than 75 millimeters of rain fell on Quebec City, flooding basements, roads, and highways. The storm has been declared a catastrophe. More than $30 million in insured losses, says Glenn McGillivray, Managing Director of the Institute for Catastrophic Loss Reduction. But he doesn't expect that event to have as big an impact as last year's record-breaking flood. Nearly a year ago, flooding on August 9th and 10th, 2024, caused an estimated $2.7 billion in insured damage, the costliest severe weather event in Quebec history. On Thursday, flash flooding on roads forced about 15 people from their homes, with some residences being evacuated by emergency services. The Canadian Press reports torrential rain also led officials to close streets in Quebec City's historic district and other parts of Quebec. Strong winds damaged trees and triggered power outages. There's only so much you can do when it comes to rain source floods or pluvial floods. The ground can only absorb so much water. The stormwater system can only accommodate so much water in a certain amount of time. Once it exceeds the capacity, once the ground exceeds the capacity to absorb that water, once the storm sewer system exceeds the capacity, has reached this capacity to try and move that water from the residential areas, from the city to the lakes and rivers. There's only one place where that rainwater is going to go. It's into the buildings, into the houses. So it's something that the municipal governments need to look at to try and adapt the stormwater system, stormwater drain system to accommodate higher and higher volumes, especially in those areas that are known to receive this amount of water. So in the GTA, in July, we usually see at least one big storm that's going to drench the city and cause floodings in certain areas. Quebec is another area in Canada. Definitely sees those floodings from major rainfall systems. So in the historic areas of Quebec City, there's only so much you can do to improve the system that was there, considering how old the system is in Quebec City. So it's always a balancing act for the municipal government to try and balance between the amount of funds they have available to improve the entire area as opposed to dealing with very old systems that you have in older cities. Parts of Montreal saw between 70 and 80 millimeters of rain in 3 hours, surpassing the average rainfall for the entire month of July. The storm caused localized flooding across major intersections and buildings in the southern regions of Quebec. It will take some time for loss estimates to be totaled for either of this week's flood events. McGillivray tells Canadian Underwriter that last year's record-breaking flood, despite two more major flood events in Quebec this week, many areas of the province remain just as vulnerable to flood issues. That's because the kind of infrastructure fixes required to reduce water damage remain out of reach in the short term. Parts of Montreal require significant long-term fixes that would be very capital intensive, and these don't happen in a year. It will take some time before we start seeing a difference being made there. Many older homes have combined drainage systems where sewage and stormwater leave homes via the same pipe, he explains. And yeah, I've seen those systems, and it's kind of nasty what happens when those types of systems get overrun by rainwater. It just causes now sewage to be mixed in with the rainwater that's being drained into the lakes or rivers, wherever the system drains out into. New homes, in comparison, would have two separate lines, one for sewage and one for stormwater. That would lead to two separate pipes under the street. Switching systems from old combined systems to a new separated system is a very expensive and disruptive process, McGillivray said. Additionally, many homes and low-rises in Montreal have reverse slope driveways where there are garages located under the homes. We see many basements flood as a result of relics from a time pass. And there are a lot of houses in the Greater Toronto and Hamilton area that also have reverse slope driveways. So normal driveways, you have the garage on level, and the driveway is going to slope away from the garage. So any rainwater that falls onto the driveway is going to drain into the streets. Reverse slope driveways, so you have the garage below grade and the driveway slopes down towards the garage. There's usually going to be a drain at the bottom of the driveway. However, a lot of times that drain can clog up with leaves and other debris, preventing the water from being drained out. Also, for that particular drain, sometimes that drain only drains into the ground. There's no actual stormwater system that water drains into. So if the ground gets saturated, now that drain is not going to perform anything. So all that water that's accumulating will now go into the basement. So you don't see really new homes these days being built with reverse slope driveways. And many insurance companies do not want to insure houses with reverse slope driveways for that reason, because they're worried that the drains will be clogged and the rainwater will have nowhere to go besides inside the house itself. So that's what's going on in Quebec. And our last story for today: which Ontario cities see the highest auto coverage hikes? Auto insurance premiums are still rising in most Ontario cities despite efforts to keep a lid on rate hikes, notes a recent analysis by My Choice. Auto theft in the province, rising repair costs, insurance fraud, including staged collisions, and rising claim payouts are all factors behind premium gains, say the insurance comparison sites report. Interestingly, the Financial Services Regulatory Authority of Ontario recently issued a rule requiring insurers to make ongoing, detailed reports on auto insurance fraud. Over time, better data and stricter oversight could help stabilize system costs and gradually lead to more affordable premiums. Yeah, we're still waiting for that. Ontario's Financial Services Regulator is monitoring medical services fraud related to auto accident insurance claims in the province. We saw a story about that not too long ago. The Canadian InsurTech analyzed its own quote data from January to June 2024, and for the same 6-month period in 2025 to determine year-over-year increase rates for Ontario auto premiums. The overview finds an average car insurance premium increase of 4.1% across the province in the first half of 2025. My Choice notes is in keeping with the rising rate trend over the past few years. In terms of where rates are rising within Ontario, Kingston sees the sharpest hike, with an average premiums climbing 14.73% year over year. I was not betting on Kingston, that's for sure. Sharp gains are also recorded in Barrie, up 13.78%, Windsor up 12.69%, Innisfil, that's surprising, up 12.15%, and Belleville up 11.92%. My Choice's review of the data finds Brampton is Ontario's most expensive city for drivers, with an average annual premium of $3,341. That's an 11% increase in coverage costs year over year from 2024. That was going to be my bet, because Brampton's usually the most expensive jurisdiction to insure in Ontario. In fact, I think it's one of the most expensive jurisdictions to insure a vehicle in all of Canada. So, but luckily, it only had an 11% increase year over year as compared to other jurisdictions like Kingston. Like I said, that's a kind of surprise. Premium hikes are more modest in areas like Scarborough, up 0.52%, Ottawa, up 1.04%, Guelph, up 1.53%, and Huntsville, up 1.63%. Meanwhile, sizable declines are seen in premiums for drivers in Markham, down 7.05%, Mississauga, down 2.17%, and Richmond Hill, down 2.12%. Toronto experienced a 1.06% decline. Even within the same province, insurers calibrate their rates based on very localized risk data, everything from collision frequency to vehicle theft patterns, which is why drivers sometimes see sharp differences in premiums between neighboring communities. Meanwhile, a companion survey from InsurTech finds Kingston, Brantford, Burlington, and Brampton as the most dangerous cities for drivers in Ontario. Toronto and its environs rank as the safest. So, interpret the data as you will. It's all about claims costs, claims frequencies. So, to say Kingston is the most dangerous cities for drivers in Ontario might be a bit hyperbolic. Let's face it, the traffic in Toronto is way worse than you'll ever find in Kingston. So, like I said, a bit hyperbolic to claim those cities are more dangerous than other cities to drive in Ontario. But normally, like I said before, it's usually Brampton is going to be the most expensive. It was a couple of years ago, the city of Vaughan that was the most expensive. So Vaughan and Brampton are beside each other. There's Woodbridge in between them. So, the rest of us in Ontario are just watching Vaughan and Brampton just going back and forth, taking the titles of the most expensive place to insure a vehicle in Ontario. So that's not a crown you want. But I guess Vaughan drivers have woken up a bit and improved themselves to get that title back to Brampton. And Vaughan wasn't exactly on this list of most expensive biggest rate increases or biggest rate decreases. Markham right beside Vaughan there, so they were down 7.05%, but unfortunately it doesn't show the list of every city and town in Ontario. So Vaughan, keep doing what you're doing. Brampton, I don't know what to tell you. It's like I said, this has been a problem for you guys for quite a long time, so hopefully something changes up there, because you know, you keep complaining about the cost of insurance, but unfortunately the claims data bears out that the premiums are kind of justified for your area. So hopefully something in Brampton proves that you guys can stop suffering so much. So that's it for me for today. I want to thank you for joining me. If you like what I do here, please like and subscribe. Follow Insurance in Canada on Twitter/X. And until next time, bye-bye.